As the federal government and the state join forces in fighting the coronavirus scourge, the federal and state power lines and limitations are raised. Tonight, we analyze the nation's federal structure and the powers of the leaders both in the state and at the center. And the pressure to deliver mounts on President Buhari amidst issues of battling the coronavirus disease and its spread. But Nigerians are raising worries over what is next for Nigeria after the coronavirus is gone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. This is Politics Today, live on Channels Television. Well, we get some information for you on the coronavirus disease and the battle against it. As we know now, is that 34 new cases as announced by the the National Center for Disease Control, which says that the COVID-19 cases have been jacked up by the new case of 34 above the 400 mark. It stands now at 407, 18 in Lagos, 12 in Kano State, 2 in Katsina, 1 in Delta, and 1 in Niger State. Well, this is sad news from Lagos, where the government says it has recorded 3 more deaths from COVID-19 related complications. The Commissioner for Health, Professor Abayami, says that the dead are all males aged 51, 52, and 62. According to Professor Abayami, one of the dead is a medical doctor who had contact with an infected person that recently returned to the country. The other victims, according to him, have no travel history or record of contact with any infected person. Well, the Kano State government said it has recorded its 4th COVID-19 death and an additional 12 cases of the disease, bringing the total number of confirmed cases in the state to 21. Of course, we know that the Presidential Task Force held its daily press briefing today, and the Minister of Health, Dr. Osage and Hanier, has warned that private hospitals that engage in treatment of COVID-19 cases without accreditation will be closed down for the contamination. Take a listen to the Minister of Health.
Adhere to all government instructions and regulations, to always utilize personal protective equipment as the situation demands, to maintain a high index of suspicion for COVID-19 infection, and to protect themselves, their loved ones, and their colleagues. I use this opportunity to again strongly advise my colleagues in medical profession against secretly or privately managing people who have COVID-19 infection outside of accredited health facilities. We cannot afford to have avoidable morbidity and mortality. Private facilities must obtain accreditation in order to be allowed to treat this highly infectious disease. Practitioners engaging in unauthorized treatment of COVID-19 run the risk of being shut down, their hospitals being shut down for decontamination. This next phase of our strategy in the health sector, due to the available evidence of increasing community transmission in Nigeria, now focuses on community response rather than individual travelers and their contacts in society.
Well then, there are some issues that have been raised, of course. I mean, before the coronavirus came, there's been conversation around the Nigerian constitution, the federal system of government. What are the borderline of the powers of the center and that of the state government. Those have been identified. The president signed the Quarantine Act, which puts into effect the powers of the federal government to make laws regarding the health emergency and people staying at home. The federal government, through the president, has said that the lockdown order will be increased for another 14 days after the first 14 days the president announced to help fight the coronavirus spread, at least in 3 states, 2 states, of course, and the FCT, Lagos and Ogun State. But since then, some state governments have been making their own decisions. But there was a clash recently when in Rivers State, the governor effected an arrest of a company, Cavatin, which the governor says flouted the order of the state on the issue of lockdown. So the Minister of Aviation, Mr. Serika, has said that the state governor does not have the power. It's not at the prerogative of the governor to make such decision. Tonight, we will discuss that. But in a moment, let's check some updates we have for you from some parts of the country. And of course, Professor Oshibajo is making some decision. Take a listen to our political roundup.
The Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, says the measures being put in place by the Economic Sustainability Committee are designed to ensure Nigeria's economy enters positive growth by 2021. Speaking to State House correspondents after the 3rd Economic Sustainability Committee meeting chaired by the Vice President, Professor Yemi Oshibajo, the minister says the committee is looking at ways to provide care interventions for each sector of the economy as the world slides into a recession as one of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Governor Abubakar Bello of Niger State has raised concerns over the lack of testing center for coronavirus in the state, urging the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, NCDC, to establish at least one. This is coming after the NCDC announced the confirmation of a second case of COVID-19 in the state. The governor, who was on an inspection tour to one of the isolation centers in Mina, donated by a private individual, expresses worry that there could be many more cases of coronavirus yet to be identified due to lack of a testing center. The Cross River State Governor, Professor Ben Ayada, has flagged up the distribution of stimulus package to vulnerable persons as well as citizens who cannot afford to fend for themselves due to age or incapacitation across the 18 local government areas of the state. Speaking at the State Food Bank at Crosspill in Calabar, the governor insisted that the food items be distributed evenly by the traditional rulers to those who fall under the indigent group category. Governor Ben Ayade also used the occasion to announce a 30,000 naira monthly stipends for beneficiaries of the automatic employment given to 8,000 youths between the ages of 18 to 35, starting from Tuesday next week.
Well, let's get into the conversation of tonight. My panel is already here. They are lawyers. Mr. Curtis Adigba is a political strategist and a lawyer. And I have also Mr. Evan Sufeli. He's a lawyer and a public affairs analyst. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming tonight.
Thanks.
Well,
it's a pleasure.
Something that is happening here in Nigeria is also happening in the United States. Interestingly, President Donald Trump in the United States is saying, look, that America has reached the peak of the coronavirus case, and that it has the absolute power to ask things to return to normal. But Governor Cuomo in New York says, no, that until May 12th, that businesses should still be shut down. In Nigeria, similar scenario was playing out when the governor of Rivers State effected an arrest of some pilots and some passengers on a Cavatin airline, and the federal government, through the aviation minister, said you do not have that power, underlining the powers of the federating unit and the federal government. So a lot of people have been debating, where lies the power of the state or the power of the federal government? Let me begin with you, Mr. Ofeli. Was Mr. Wike wrong or right?
No, Mr. Wike was wrong, absolutely wrong to have made such an arrest. Because let's first of all look at the extant laws in situations like this. First, the Constitution and then the Quarantine Act. The Quarantine Act was the act where the president, upon which its provision made the regulation. And then the stretch of the regulation was that there should be a lockdown. The Quarantine Act didn't say there should be a lockdown. It said that the president have a power to make regulations. Now, the regulations could turn to be in any form that is most suitable for the situation, in which case the president went for a lockdown, which is actually commendable. Now, if you look at the Constitution in Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution, and if you look at the subsection, it talks about the governor, where there is issues like this, where there's problem or there is present and cogent danger, people's lives are endangered, okay? It is not for the governor to make regulations or make laws or make orders. He is to apply to the president to make such proclamation. But the crux of the matter is that the Constitution, Section 305, relates more to issues of war, breakdown of law and order, and all that. The primary legislation is the Quarantine Act. Now, the Quarantine Act
Which
is
was
federal
signed
legislation.
by the federal government just a few days ago.
No. It's the regulation. It's the
Yeah.
regulation that was signed. The Quarantine Act has been there since 1926. Yeah. Okay, it's called the Quarantine Act Q2, Laws of the Federation, 2004. Okay, that law is the extant legislation primarily on the issues of health challenges of this nature. And that law did not give the governors any powers to do whatever. Even if the governors domesticate such laws, they cannot alter it. It's still there from Section 3, 4, 5, and 6. The president still have the powers to make regulations when he identified the areas. Okay? Because we're in a situation where if we allow the governors now to begin to make their own regulations based on the Quarantine Act, very soon a local government chairman will come out and say he has the power to lock down his local government. But a councillor will come out one day and say he has the power to lock his own ward. And when we have a chaos.
Mr. Adigba, under federalism system of government like we operate, where lies the power of the state governor in that sense? Because the lockdown order does not affect River State. But the governor said he has the power to make decision in that sense.
Okay, and first of all, I think you must understand, like he quoted from the Constitution, Section 5, vest executive power of the Federation in the president of the country, who can exercise that power by himself, his vice, or ministers in his government. Now, the same Section 5, I think subsection 3, also gives executive power at the state level to state governors, specifically for laws that are made by the State House of Assembly. So these things are interwoven. Now, but when you talk about the conflict, like we're also witnessing in the US, that is even very, very simple. Because unlike our Constitution that is a bit convoluted and difficult to understand, that of the US is very simple. It says whatever power is not expressly given to the president or the federal government is reserved for the state. That's it. So on that basis, states have enacted their laws that do not necessarily confront or challenge the authority of the government.
But in the case of Nigeria, can the president, at the power at the center, override the power of the state government?
It depends on what the issue is. Is it an issue that the president has got exclusive right, like you have exclusive legislative list, as well as concurrent legislative list? Is it an issue that both levels of government can deal with? But to the specific question that you asked, and like he mentioned, we have, again, attempted to, to color every issue through the lens of politics. We're beginning to look at this issue through the lenses of APC and PDP politics. And so some actors want to show that, of course, they belong to a different political hue and that the president cannot control them. But this is a very, very serious issue. I'll give you an example, for instance.
Sorry, apologies, because we need to take a break now. Because there are different things that we need to look into in this issue and how the federal government, President Buhari, is going to resuscitate the economy after the coronavirus. These are some of the issues that will come up. We'll also look at what is obtainable in the U.S. If we make that example, is it obtainable here in Nigeria? Some of the conversation we have when we return from this break, everyone. Join us again. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Let's get back to the conversation. Mr. Curtis Adigba and Mr. Evans Ofeli, both of them are lawyers. Mr. Adigba has his expertise in political strategy, and Mr. Ofeli is a public affairs analyst also. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on. So you were saying,
Yes, so
because what is obtainable in the United States, for example, where Mr. Trump said, look, I have, as a president, I have absolute powers. But the governor of New York said, no, wait a minute, you don't have. In fact, no business will open until May. Does that apply in Nigeria?
Yes, it can.
The governor has that power.
No.
Can a governor in Nigeria say, look, you can't lock down my state?
That's why I said, look, both systems are federal, but with some clear differences. In the United States, powers that are not expressly vested in the federal government, they belong to the state. In fact, states are more powerful in the US than the federal government. That's the truth of the matter. Okay? So what we have here is politics. Trump is playing politics, skirting on the edge of illegality. Why? A week ago, remember, at a press conference, when he was told to lock down the entire country, he said he couldn't do it because he didn't have the power to lock down the states. That the power to lock down states belonged to the governors. The governors did. Then he came under pressure from his handlers because they're looking at the numbers and the economy that is his main selling point is tanking. So president wants to reopen the economy, and so he is now saying, oh, I have the power. But thank God he walked back last night by saying he doesn't have the power anymore. What he says he has now is the power to suspend the Congress of the United States and confirm some of his nominees that have been waiting for confirmation in the Senate. So that's what, let's bring it home. Even when a governor has got internal problems that he wants to declare a state of emergency in Nigeria, the governor cannot do it. He has to go to the president.
But in the case of boundaries, can a state governor in Nigeria, because almost all the state governors are doing that, shutting down their boundaries.
That is another illegality.
Illegality,
if you look at Section 8 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, the issues of boundary, adjustments, lockdown, or whatever is the exclusive preserve of the federal government. In fact...
On federal roads alone or on state roads too?
Well, on boundaries.
So a governor cannot shut down a state, can it?
The governor cannot shut down a state because no state is in isolation. Every state borders another state. So you can't do such lockdown. And if you look at the Quarantine Act, which actually is the extant law here, let's not forget that that act was an act that predated the Constitution and then predated federalism. As at that time in 1929, 1926, it was an offshoot of the Clifford Constitution of 1922. Okay? And then you know that federal structure was first introduced into Nigeria by the Littleton Constitution of 1954, which was not even a full federal arrangement. Federalism became grounded when we moved from the Littleton Constitution of 1954 to the Macpherson Constitution, not the Macpherson Constitution, to the Constitution of the Independence Constitution and then other 1963 Constitution. That is the laid down proper federal structure in Nigeria. Okay? Now, if you look at the Quarantine Act, it has no provision for a state governor to act. So if a state governor, if a state governor adopts it, because then it was a unitary system. So if a state governor now domesticate, or if the state domesticate that law, the president will still be the power point to act.
All right. So, I mean, in this sense, Mr. Adigba, if you say the state governors do not have the power to lock down their state, but there is a health emergency.
Yeah, and that's the point that I was trying to make. You see, look at what the governor of Lagos did at the initial time. He announced to the state and said, look, we have an existential threat, and I think we need to put some restriction on movement. He said, I cannot order a total lockdown because I'm a sub-sovereign within a sovereign state. Now, not until he consulted with the president, and the president decided that it was time, based on the data, to order a lockdown of Lagos, Ogun State, and Abuja. He couldn't have done a total lockdown. because it doesn't have that power.
But one of the lessons will be whether or not we need to look into our laws also to see because there are some cases where, for example, when you have a Lassa fever outbreak, it's not a nationwide emergency. It might be a statewide emergency, but the state governors don't have the powers to shut down their states to prevent.
The governor is the chief security officer of his state to the extent that he administers his state to ensure peace and stability. Not to the extent of locking down anywhere.
He cannot restrict people from being.
If a governor tries to lock down anyway, it becomes arbitrary, it becomes treasonable. So,
because I want us to touch on one more issue before we close the program. Yeah. And it's what Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the leader of the APC, said. He said Nigerians are hungry. And the fact that he was talking in the statement yesterday, talking about how Nigeria can get back on track after the post-COVID-19 period. He released a statement. In that statement, he was also talking about debt forgiveness. We have a lot of huge debt on our hands, and we are entered into this period. He also talked about that the CBN should lower interest rates to single digits. These are some of the things coming from Bola Tinubu. What do you see us? Let me begin with you, Mr. Adigba.
I respect Mr. Ahmed Bola Tinubu or Senator Ahmed Bola Tinubu, former governor of Lagos State. But I also understand that he has a lot of lever with this government. You know, he can speak to whoever is in this government, including the president of this country. And so he will do a lot more if this is a direct message to the power that be. But having said that, I hear all the politicians talking about hunger in the land. There have always been hunger in this land. And there will continue to be hunger even after COVID-19. Now, what this does is that, again, reopens clearly for everybody to see the economic issues, or it shines the light on the basic economic issues, that we have a country that is not inclusive enough. There are a lot of people who go to bed every night anxious about when the next meal is going to come from. This has always been with us. We know about this. You know?
But the pressure now is going to be on President Buhari on how he can get us out of here. And afterwards, how can we get back? Of course, a lot of people have said that the world has run into a recession.
Yeah. You see, the way we should get out of this, the president or the presidency should understand that 65% of Nigerians are in the informal sector. 35% belong to the formal sector. Now, through the CBN and then the federal government, they have made a lot of palliative for the formal sector that constitutes 35% of our GDP, which is that they have made tax rebates. The CBN have done a lot to make sure that the economy does not collapse.
On loans and
yes, moratoriums on loans and other companies declaring force majeure and all that. They have ensured that the economy does not collapse under the pandemic. But when you now look at the informal sector, the market women, the artisans, okay, people on the street, the federal government need to design a proper model to cater for these sets. And because this is the set that really makes up the Nigeria we're talking about. And until you do that, and also the law, the Quarantine Act, we must also do something about it because it's not meant to be a punitive law. Okay. The regulation is not meant to be a punitive law.
We're obviously out of time.
I was just going to say that we also need to restructure or rethink our federal system again. Yes. It's not working for anybody as it stands. It puts too much burden on the federal. Yeah. And then even in terms of execution, most of the governors are walking away freely with passes. Yes. So we have to rethink.
A lot of lessons, I think, post-COVID-19. I must sincerely thank you for your thoughts tonight. Mr. Curtis Adigba, lawyer and political strategist. Mr. Evans Ofeli, a lawyer and public affairs analyst. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. Yes. But that's our show for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Sean Kimaloe. Bye for now.